everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Chismis Corner podcast, brought to you by Pitt FSA. I'm your host, Michael Pacifico.
I'm your other host, Laika Mamrel.
And today we have a special guest, Julianne. Say hello.
Hello, I'm Julianne.
And can kind of just tell us kind of your affiliation with Pitt FSA, anything like that?
Got you. My name is Julianne Castillo. I'm a senior majoring in marketing with an international business certificate, and I was the former business manager for Pitt FSA in 2020 to 2021.
Okay. And with that being said, I kind of want to just bring in our topic. So today we are going to be talking about beauty standards. A little bit focused on the Filipino culture of beauty standards, but it can kind of just go off into a tangent of just beauty in general.
Gotcha.
Let's just go with like an overview of just everything like current. So what current beauty standards do you think that people follow today, just in terms of like aesthetics, I guess?
I think it's really interesting because the speed of which beauty trends are changing has increased over the last couple of years. Yeah. I feel like with TikTok, it's rapidly changing from everything that's kind of going on. And honestly, it's become a lot more international. I think the looks and fashion and beauty standards have kind of combined into a more global standard versus what it used to be, just like very Western versus very like Asian or whatever you want to call it. So I think right now it's like everybody's so tired of trying to conform, but that in itself is almost conformity because you're trying to kind of find your own segment within the beauty standard.
Yeah, I would definitely say that everything with social media kind of like puts it on a pedestal so far that everybody's trying to kind of look for the new best thing or unique thing. But like you said, that in itself just kind of makes it a normalized kind of topic that everybody tries to go for. I guess in terms of like beauty standards, well, one thing, at least for like a guy's perspective, I think at least for a guy, like with the, like you said, the globalized kind of beauty standards, especially for like, I guess it would have to be the main one, K-pop, for example, everybody's trying to get like a K-pop cut, try to dress K-pop, something like that. But, a lot of times, like, I think for Asians in general, for guys, like we've never had like a style that was our own in a sense that like people wanted, like no one 10 years ago, no one was like, let me look K-poppy,
For sure.
They were just like, everybody's just trying to look Hollywood or, Western, but now it's kind of shifted towards that Eastern, beauty standards. But that's just kind of my small take on like a current. What about anything else?
I don't know. I feel like this is kind of a hard question to answer just because people could be on different realms of TikTok. So like, and different aesthetics. So I kind of just view things like I group people based on their different aesthetics because, someone could be wearing street and someone could be wearing Y2K. I don't really think there's like a uniform.
But I feel like, at least for now, like right now, like, whenever fashion is put into like the limelight, especially for like previous years, it was always just one strict thing you followed. Now it doesn't matter if you're Y2K, streetwear,
that's true. Yeah.
Fancy whatever, K-pop. There's like you said, there's niches and there's bigger areas for that, but everybody's kind of just like there's going to be a place for you to show off your stuff.
I agree.
But yeah.
To that extent, I feel like it kind of makes sense because like a lot of things were underground or like you were in the subculture, but everything kind of has risen to the culture. Like that is just TikTok culture in general of what it is. So now it's just like you said, there's a place for everybody, but it's kind of hard because I feel like everyone's chasing a certain aesthetic constantly and changing, which is fine, but it's like consumerism wise, I think that's really, really negative. So I think people are just so consumed with wanting the next best thing.
I know. Some trends that I've liked, like even a few months that I haven't gone around to like purchasing myself are already like gone. And it's like, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, to kind of just jump on that one, like let's just take like in terms of just like how we grew up, like everybody I think we've had a conversation like this, like, but everyone's always had like an awkward phase, you know. There's no guidance, you know. You're just kind of just doing whatever because you think it's like cool or cute or whatever. But now all of a sudden,
oh my God,
you have a guideline now.
Yeah.
You have someone who can tell you, look like this. Don't just follow, do everything. You pretty much have a tutorial for how to kind of delve through your like awkward phase.
Yeah.
And now I don't really see that anymore. You know, obviously social media
either.
gives you that limelight to be like, you know, I show the best that I have to offer. You'll never see like the worst in me. But, you know, do you think that's like a detrimental thing towards like beauty?
I definitely think it is. I feel very strongly about my awkward phase, probably because I had such a horrible one. But I think that's like a part of growing up, like, you know, learning how to do your makeup or how to dress right. And I think that is almost like a necessary step. I see like kids, like 13-year-olds, like dressing up like how we dress up, and we're 21-year-olds. And I feel like they lose a sense of childhood and a sense of innocence by missing out on that awkward phase. What do you think, Julianne?
I agree. I think kind of for me, the individuality of it kind of stands out because you're at such a young age, you're forced to kind of choose where you want to be already. And it's kind of almost like people are surprised when you don't start conforming to something because like everything is an option. Everything's out there. Every tutorial is out there for how to be cool, how to look like this, how to look like that. So it's too much information at such a young age. And I think that you lose your sense of like ability to think for yourself and have a minute to be young. Like you said.
Exactly.
I think people like, but then like what happens when you go to college? Like you're doing the exact same makeup looks, exact same things. Like what is the difference? There is no point to just be you. Yeah.
Now, do you think that in terms of just kind of finding your individuality, do you think like, what do you think is going to be like a contrast between someone who didn't have that and then someone who like had like the tutorials and everything? Do you think there's going to be a like certain like trait or just like characteristic that when they grow up, like they're gonna like you said you missed that innocence in childhood? What about that will kind of be like detrimental to like the kid growing up? You know what I'm saying?
I think it's kind of like narcissism almost. I think a lot of people have like published like soft studies because we're not at that age where there's a large enough data pool for us to be surveying, but like there was a higher sense of narcissism with people who grew up with Instagram and TikTok and Twitter. Definitely. Because it's like they feel this pressure that everyone's looking at them versus maybe when no one was looking at us, no one cared, we were still kids. Like for us to be even on YouTube, no one knew what was on YouTube yet, so it was kind of like this sense of you were just still out there in the world looking out versus the world looking in.
Yeah, I think it definitely, as Julianne said, I think it manifests into self-image problems. I feel like if you didn't have those resources or, you know, if you didn't have TikTok and stuff like that, I feel like you're definitely a lot more carefree about certain things. But once you see other people, you know, dressing a certain way and you want to emulate that, it does get a little bit harmful on your self-image. So
Okay. So like I kind of have like a similar thing to what you guys are saying, but I think that especially for talking about the younger generation, you know, I think now with, you know, social media and just the internet in general and how it's advanced, you know, growing up, you don't really think about yourself as like you being you have a brand now. You have your internet self, and then you have, I guess you could call, you know, your true self or whatever. And I feel like the detrimental part is always going to be, you know, are you always just going to keep up this, like, I don't know if you want to call it a facade, but are you just going to always keep up your image online? Because everybody, 99% is always just going to be like, I want to put my best foot forward. I always want to, you know, if it's the trends, I'll do everything for the trends. If it's something else, I'll just kind of just conform to that. But I feel like in the long run, once you kind of grasp what you want to do in life, and, you know, you finally come into terms with just kind of like growing up, and you kind of have to kind of figure out like, well, like, do I have to keep on always having to like do all this like new stuff or new trends or whatever? And kind of just, I guess it would go towards like mental health, you know, because you're always, like I said, you're trying to you're essentially a kid creating your own brand in how you look. I feel like, you know, it's just going to bite you in the end, to be honest, if you don't really try to stay true to yourself or try to at least find something that you're passionate about.
For sure. My argument to that is I think that that's true, and I think it's kind of crazier because we have a brand, like you said, that we have to market for jobs and other people. But it kind of reminds me of like what the Japanese say, that every person has three faces. The one that they only show to themselves, the one they show to their closest people around them, and then the one you show to the rest of the world. So to a certain extent, I think humanity has always kind of been like that, having to have different perceptions of themselves. I think now it's just harsher because it's being judged so much more closely and so much more like monetarily. Like everybody's trying to capitalize on all their passions. Like you said, it's not a passion for a passion, it's a passion for a paycheck.
Right.
So
well, like I guess like especially just going off in like in the mental health area, like whenever social media came about, like for the most part, like if you had one, you kind of just posted anything. You didn't really care. It could just be the food you ate. You didn't do the aesthetic photos. You were just like roots. That's it. Now everybody's got to dress it up. It's got to look like the best thing ever. You know, I just feel like, you know, putting so much effort into like your brand kind of just like takes away from, I guess, the fun of it all. You know, just like living in the moment, I guess is what I'm trying to look for. Because I don't think you're ever gonna like look at anything other than just like a brand itself and not just take it as it is.
For sure, yeah.
But yeah, anything else to add on to that?
With that, I think the filters is like a really harsh thing, because I think in the past it used to be just like, oh, pick a different colored filter and just like post it on the internet. But now it's like, what's the one that's going to make me look the tannest, the skinniest, the prettiest, and that's just altering everyone's perception of how they see themselves. And I think that it's kind of hard now because like it's just everywhere. No one will ever post an unfiltered photo,
right?
Or they have to take 20 or 30 or however many to find the one. So it's so like hard to be yourself, I think.
Yeah, or even like Facetune. I just feel like I just don't really like social media because I feel like it's so superficial, but I don't know.
It's kind of hard, yeah.
All right. To kind of take it back into just kind of like beauty as a whole, I guess. So everybody here is Filipino.
Correct.
You didn't notice everybody, but everybody is. So we did an episode before this one, and we kind of touched upon Filipino beauty standard just in terms of like entertainment and media. So like you always see, if you're watching Miss Universe, you're watching, you know, the movies or whatever, it's always like fair skin, white as possible pretty much. And, you know, if possible, they're like probably half white and, you know, they're mixed ethnicity. And just to kind of get one talking point out, do you think that's like a full like Filipino thing, or do you think that's like an Asian thing in general?
I think it's an Asian thing in general, but I could see that there are certain parts that are more Filipino about it than others. Like historically speaking, with like colonization and everything, historically, like how we viewed things. But I also think that it is kind of an Asian thing in general. I could see a lot of overlap with a lot of other cultures. I think the way that the Filipinos kind of have it is that it bleeds so much into entertainment that it's kind of hard to get away from. I think what you see so much is heavily consumed by that. And it's even hard when you were talking about beauty pageants, like even the controversy of like the most previous winner, who was Miss Philippines, like people were criticizing her because she didn't look Filipino enough. And it was just like, what does Filipino enough look like in this day and age, you know?
Right.
So I don't know, it's just kind of interesting to think what is Filipino look like. And I kind of think that too, where it's like you're in the United States and you're here and people, you know, can think that you're Asian, but they don't know what type of Asian you are. But when you go to the Philippines, you're not fully Filipino because you didn't grow up in the Philippines.
Right.
So what does that mean in terms of what you look like?
So it kind of delves into like identity as well. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, like you said, like now that I think about it, I do definitely think that it does go towards like Asian as like a whole, just because like beauty products in general, I think definitely like either Korean or like Japanese ones, like always like markets like milky white skin, you know what I'm saying? Like
skin lightening.
And I don't know, like is it just an attempt to kind of emulate, like where do you think it because you said like it historically has always been like that, where what specifically, like, is the tone of, like, has it always been like a hierarchy in terms of just like,
I think it's the hierarchy, right?
Okay.
Yeah. It's like the darker you were, it's because you worked in the fields. That means you were lower class. The lighter you are, that means you didn't have to work out in the fields, that you were higher class. And I think to a certain extent, it's like almost Westernization. They envy the Western looks. And I kind of see less so maybe in the Philippines, but like a lot of other countries where plastic surgery is like the thing. Like a lot of girls get plastic surgery as graduation presents. It's kind of crazy to think that like they want to emulate more Western features because that's just what's the norm. And it honestly, parents will give it to them because it's what'll get their foot in the door, because for some places your resume has a photo of yourself in it. So the more attractive you look, the lighter you look, the better chances you are despite your credentials.
Yeah, I didn't know about having images on your resume, which I think changes a lot. But yeah, I have heard about like double eyelid surgery because, you know, monolids are not for Filipinos, but for other
Cultures,
Asian cultures, like a very characteristic like facial feature, which I think is unique and should be preserved. But, you know, that's
I agree.
my own opinion.
I think in terms of like beauty, I think like when you compare Western and Eastern, I feel like Western has the identity that it can always change and still be Western, but Eastern always kind of has this connotation where it's kind of always just going to be like, it'll always stay the same. Whatever is trendy for like the Eastern like beauty standards, I feel like it always will stay that way. But then Western one, it kind of can be like experimental, I guess, and like that can be the new norm or standard for like Western beauty. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I agree. I think that could even be shown in like fashion and beauty. Like the people in Western cultures were always more experimental than in Eastern cultures. I think that kind of comes from a traditional standpoint where people don't like the change, and a lot of the respect your elders kind of comes in where they still kind of are holding the key to acceptance for a lot of the culture. So a lot of people will not want to teeter on that. But that's kind of interesting because like what I was saying earlier, it's like now that a lot of people are Asian American, what does that look like in terms of mixing it up in terms of beauty, skincare, all of that. And interracial marriage, I think, is going to change how we view beauty standards too.
Beautiful.
Oh, for sure.
Make more mixed babiys. We said that last episode. We'll say it again.
That's what we're going to look like, Brazil, you know?
There it is. There ain't nothing wrong with that.
Do not mind, yeah.
I just
What
I guess I'm trying to go in towards that. Why do you think like the image of just keeping, I guess, you know, Filipino, why do you think it's so prevalent? Do you think it's a kind of mentality that like if you're not full Filipino, you kind of lose that tradition, that sense of like being Filipino? Because like you said, there will, you know, we can't really tell, like, if someone is 1% Filipino versus someone who's 100%, there's still a percent there, you know, you're still Filipino to a degree. But how, like, in terms of numbers or anything like that, where do you think, like, is there ever going to be a line that someone has to be like, that still doesn't mean you're Filipino, you know?
I think that's a really good question.
I mean, because like just to add on to this, maybe to give it more like food for thought, like in my eyes, for myself, I don't feel Filipino in any sense. I feel more American, like to the bone. You know, I might enjoy the food. You know, my mom always speaks to me in Tagalog, everything like that. But like until I embrace the culture in terms of just like, you know, learning about it, speaking the language, and just kind of anything like that, I don't think I'll ever kind of identify to the extent that I can actually like say I'm Filipino and like, I guess, mean it, I guess, honestly.
I think that's kind of like depending how you want to see yourself, either first generation and second generation. I think that in itself is an interesting topic to talk about. I would consider myself second generation because my parents both like lived a large portion of their life here and they had me here. But that kind of takes on a different meaning of what you want to take out of being Filipino. And I agree. I think sometimes when you see yourself amongst your peers, you think that you're American, but sometimes when you do certain things or you think of certain things certain ways, it kind of changes because it's not, that's not exactly the American way to do it. It's still, you have a a hint of your culture doing it. I think the tricky part is when you start getting into interracial relationships and interracial marriages, and then you have to blend different cultures and different ideologies into one. Because personally for me, like, I have a lot of belief systems that still aren't fully American, and the influence that I've had, I think it's going to be more of a struggle when I have kids, if they are interracial, how I still am able to merge that on. I think the preservation of culture is really tricky because I don't think it's our burden to carry to preserve that culture. I think we're carrying on a new sense of self for us in the United States.
Yes.
So I don't know.
I'm going to speak on my experience because I was born in the Philippines and I immigrated here when I was 6. And in a sense, although I was born there, raised there, I still feel a disconnect with my Filipino culture. And I don't know if it's because I don't really have that many relatives here, or the fact that I lost like Bisayan, like I can't speak it at all, which was also like part of growing up because my parents wanted me to focus on English and stuff like that. So I am in this like weird position with I'm not fully American, clearly, but if I would go back to the Philippines, I don't feel, fully Filipino. So I do get kind of lost in my identity sometimes, and I don't really know how or what to do to fix it.
Well, like I've always like, I don't know, like I'm pretty sure I said this in like an episode, but like everybody, we had for episode 2 we had Stanley on, and when he was applying to become a board member, and I was like what? I was like, he was like, you're like, I was like, interesting. And it's like his story of just kind of appreciating, even though he's not Filipino, he's full Chinese, and just I feel like the mentality of like at least appreciating the culture and just wanting to learn about it, for me, validates not in the sense of being Filipino, but like in my mind, like you have like you've held traditions about being Filipino, regardless if it's food, just like whatever traditions we have, anything like that. Like in my eyes, if we're talking about, if Filipinos by blood all vanished, whatever, and you'd say Filipinos are gone. To me, if someone still keeps the traditions and everything like that, food, otherwise, there's still Filipino culture. There's still Filipinos here, even if it's not by blood.
That's true.
And I think that's just the way I perceive it.
Well, I kind of feel the same way with like what you were saying. Like I've gone back to the Philippines and I've had people tell me to my face that I'm not fully like Filipino, even though both my parents are. They're speaking. That's like our family. But for them to look at me and say like, oh, why aren't you lighter, or why aren't you this, or why aren't you that, based on their standards, but still not holding me to the standards of being American, because I'm not American. I'm not blonde, blue-eyed, like tall. So it's kind of this. It kind of shook me because I felt kind of displaced for a minute, where I wasn't fully accepted by my peers because I still had differences than them in how I looked particularly. And then I had differences in being Filipino because I didn't act like them and I wasn't fully whatever they want to consider. And it's kind of crazy to think like for them it's a lot of image, but that's what they place such a heavy emphasis on, how you look.
And then just kind of get background. So has ever, like growing up, were you in a like heavily Filipino community, anything like that?
When I grew up, I was born and raised in Bergen County, which is very, very Filipino, like Bergenfield, very Filipino. My grandparents were there, my aunts, uncles, everybody was Filipino. I had Filipino best friends. Then I moved to Virginia, very, very not Filipino, not very diverse, just very white. And it was a very stark difference in the beliefs and how people kind of carried themselves.
I've lived in Pittsburgh ever since, and Mike, we both know.
Yeah, there ain't nobody
we don't have,
here.
Many Filipinos here.
Hey, FSA.
But I will say this. Like, as the years have gone by, I think Pittsburgh has definitely got more, diverse. But, I remember growing up, I think I was like 8 or 7. I was getting on, I lived in a predominantly black neighborhood. And I remember I went on the bus with my sister and we rode the bus. And we got off at our stop, but before we exited, this little like girl in the back, she was like, "So that's what Asians look like." And I was like, damn, like, I was like, I was like, that's interesting. I always referred to myself, because I used to live in an area in Pittsburgh called the North Side, and I always just used to call myself North Side Mike or Asian Mike, and everybody would just go, yeah, that's about right. Because even if you look at like things growing up, I was always, the only Asian kid in the school, classroom, grade, similar to my sister, and even through like elementary, middle school, high school, community college, and then the only like contrast that ever happened was when I entered Pitt, and to be honest, it was kind of a culture shock, to be honest, because like even though there's not a lot of Filipinos here, I've always we've always had family friends who are Filipino, so you kind of get that kind of interaction, but from I guess an academic standpoint or social standpoint, like I've never like had been in like school where like I see my representation, I like see it in the classroom and everything like that. And I don't know. It was just weird to me. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I went to Duquesne, which is right down the road if you keep going down Forbes, and it's very white, Catholic, upper or like middle to upper class. So I really didn't feel any representation at all. In fact, they didn't even have like an ASA or FSA. Yeah. It wasn't until I literally transferred here then like they made one. But being here, yeah, it's nice in a sense to have like a community of people, but I still feel like there are differences between like between you and I, Julianne, or between I mean, I feel like Mike and I are a bit more similar. So I feel like identity goes beyond just culture and not just
I kind of want to talk about that for identity and things like that. I think it's kind of a tricky thing in college in particular that I've noticed, where when a group of people who are in a minority come together, they kind of create this shared sense of experience for everybody. And it's kind of hard when you don't share that exact same experience, because it almost, I don't want to say gatekeeping, but it's almost like gatekeeping where you don't exactly check off all the marks, and then you kind of still feel excluded from your own community. So I think we all have to be really careful. That was something I think we all talked about in ASA in the past, where we can't just generalize Asian cultures and kind of have this shared sense of experience, because every Asian experience, like Mike was saying, is valid. Even if you're just upholding another person's culture, it's still valid, Just wanted to put that out there. Kind of interesting for a community who has experiences in the past of being excluded can still sometimes exclude others. And it's frustrating to me because I think a lot of people kind of gain popularity and then try to, basically it's gatekeeping. What you perceive yourself to be as enough, but you are just kind of keeping others at a distance because you don't think it upholds a certain standard of what you want, and it's not fair.
Oh, I definitely agree. And Mike and I have had an experience or two that really brought this taste. If you want to explain it.
Oh, you want me to talk about it? Okay.
Yeah,
I guess I'll just kind of build up to my main talking point. But so just to kind of give everybody context, me and Laika both transferred to Pitt at the same time, and being from like the area of Pittsburgh, we are the minority here. So we kind of see these culture groups as kind of a way to kind of see people who are similar, just like you said, Julianne, to share experiences from one another, whether it's what we gain from that experience is the same. That's an entirely different thing. But we see these culture groups as kind of a way to be like, hey, I feel like we've kind of had like the similar like maybe struggles or just kind of like how we grew up. So I feel like we can kind of like bond over that thing. And for FSA, I think FSA has been good in terms of just like being able to talk to people and like not having that gatekeeper mentality. But we were like, let's do ASA too, like it's everybody, anything. So, we go to the first, what's it, GBM?
It was like a field day.
Thing? Well, no. So beforehand we went to like the welcome GBM.
Yeah.
And that was the same day as like a football game.
Yeah.
And like we were transfer kids. We wanted to experience everything. So we thought, hey, let's just spend like 30 minutes there. Then we can go to the football game. We go there, and like they have these things where like you're divided into like these groups, smaller groups, so you can kind of connect with other people. And on paper, that's cool and all, but like when a group of people don't really like want to put the effort to kind of at least talk to the new people, you kind of feel like this ain't the place for me type of thing. And you know, I feel like there might be a better word for gatekeeping, but like it kind of feels like cliques in high school, you know. You know, and it's just like, you know, they're already like solidified themselves with other people, and you know, you want friends of friends instead of, you know, meeting new people.
Correct.
And as a community that's supposed to advocate for kind of like, you know, showing love to every single, you know, ethnicity,
correct,
regardless of who they are, even if you don't match personalities, and you know, that's a whole nother thing, but like I haven't even seen that first step being put on. So like for the first GBM, we only stayed there a little bit. We didn't even get to play like the games. Like they gave us the token.
We literally
20 minutes went in, and we heard like the speeches from like the e-board members, and they were like, oh, we got to go to the game. And we immediately went out, and we just handed the tokens back in. And I was like, damn, I felt like, you know, to their credit, that was kind of probably like a dick move on our part.
Yeah, they probably did not fuck with that at all.
But you know what? Like, we were like, you know what? Like, we still want to put it like, you know, effort into going to like these events. So we went to like the picnic or something, or, you know, just like an outdoor event.
It was a field day. And we like would try to like sit with like other groups just to say, hey, what's up? And no one at all would give us the time of day. And it was tough out there.
And we were like, damn. And then we found this football, and we just started playing football with each other. And then there's like this one person. We were like, oh, let's make friends with this guy. And like 5 minutes passed. Like the moment like his friends like called back, didn't even get a chance to like ask his name, and gone. And we were just like, damn, this is pretty messed up.
Why do you guys think that is?
I feel like in my mind, it's just that. So I feel like it's a mix of, you know, people who come from, because this is, you know, we're a college. Everybody's not going to necessarily come from a background where you're you're a minority. You can come from New York. You could have hella friends who are Chinese, Japanese, Filipino, what have you. And then you could have the people who come from like Ohio. Yeah. And you've probably seen Filipinos only in your family.
Correct.
And when you meld that together and you kind of have that sense of like majority, I guess, you know, for a person who's always been around, you know, their respective ethnicities or just friends in general, you now have a bigger, I don't know if you want to say platform, but you have a authority now. And then for, you know, the people who have never had that type of like environment, if you do get into these places, you also have authority. So you can pretty much just say whatever you want, you know? Yeah. Like you can, you know, you don't have to say, hey, what's up? Like, what's your name? Blah, blah, blah. If you really don't, from a visual standpoint, if you don't like how someone looks and you don't want to talk to, nothing's stopping you from trying to be like, I don't want to talk to you.
From the way I see it, and I might get shit for it, but when I think of ASA, I feel like they're the same person, in my personal opinion. They share the same interests. They have similar personalities, even the same styles. I feel like there's a lack of individuality. And so seeing other people who may not conform to that, you know, specific, you know, idea they have of an ideal person, I feel like they'd turn down. Like, Mike is not your typical ASA looking guy.
Not the K-pop person you was looking for.
No.
I'm sorry. Really sorry.
And I feel like I don't really have similar interests in a way. And I think that's kind of fucked up, because you shouldn't have to like the same things in order to be a group. You know, I feel like a group's supposed to have different opinions, different interests, different views on things. And I just feel like they're kind of just the same person. What are your thoughts, Julianne?
I too will probably get some shit for what I have to say about this. I agree. I think that ASA has the same personality, but I think the same thing for all the other orgs. It depends on who is on eBoard. It kind of morphs the type of personality that is going to be attracted and all that stuff, which is fine. I understand it. From like, even no offense in HR, I'm a business major, HR perspective, you attract and you hire the people that you are most similar to or value. Fine. But at the same time, to me, it's very interesting because on my resume, I put that I created events for people on Pitt's campus in general to interact with Asian culture or Filipino culture in particular. But it's kind of interesting to me that time and time again, we kind of only create events for ourselves or for our own groups. I think it would be an interesting take if we tried to start taking it in a more outward approach where we interact with the community outside of the Asian community. I know we try to do things with other cultural organizations, but I think it would be really interesting to blend it into so many other things. There are a lot of groups and people in ASA and all the like orgs in general that could benefit from things from the business school or from the engineering school and just kind of have people connect in a different way that's not just about shared cultural identity but just being a Pitt student overall. I mean, I feel like I've gotten, when I first started out in ASA and FSA, I was kind of one of the only people who was in business, and that kind of already gave me a lot of shit for where people were like, oh, you're not STEM? Aw, what do you do? Like, you know, all of those things. People were just so confused by it. But that to me, it's like you never asked what I do. You kind of just assumed and kind of put me in a very stereotypical place already. And when I told people that I joined a fraternity, it was almost like a turnoff. Like, oh, you decided to go and do that? Like, they didn't accept that I just wanted to stay within the almost bounds of being an Asian student here at Pitt, and then I wanted to delve further into something that they didn't seem in their head. Because, you know, for Asian culture, being in a fraternity or Greek life is bad because of what you hear on the news or things like that. But there's just so much more than what you can perceive by being in your own bubble.
Yes.
I agree. Damn, we really... That's quite the beauty standards, guys. Really quite the beauty standards.
But I mean, that not the beauty standard, but I think that's the standard of being an Asian here, at least for Pitt.
I get it. I get it. 100%.
Yeah.
I don't, but I don't even think it's like a Pitt like.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Thing.
I'm sure it's
honestly,
everywhere. It's the microcosm of where we are, though. It's like kind of where it is.
It's true.
Yeah.
But damn. I didn't even. Damn, you are. I ain't got nothing else to say. Y'all took all the talking points.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I just challenge a lot of people. I think people have been running, no offense, the same circles for so long. I challenge people to go meet people from other schools, other disciplines, other places. I think it's just, why limit yourself to the people that have the shared experiences? You already know what they are. Go find something different. Challenge yourself. You know, you can have questions like this. I think, you know, it's fun in games when you want to talk about the same thing, but maybe try to invite people who may have a different perspective or can learn from you and offer that in and of itself. I mean, not the business school is doing that much of a great job at it, but they're working at it in terms of DEI, and they're inviting more people to the conversation, and I think that's what we should do. We want our voices to be heard, but there also has to be pushback or questions. We can't just be talking about the same things over and over and over again.
I agree.
Which is why I love Chismis Corner. That's great.
But I'm curious, why do you think that is, Julianne? Do you think there's a fear of stepping outside what they think is comfortable? Because, you know, like you said, they've created a community that, you know, has like communal experiences. Do you think they're scared to maybe step out of that?
I think so. I think there's a fear of what other... It's kind of like a keep it in the family kind of thing that we all kind of have. It's a keep it within our community kind of thing. Don't talk about all the hardships, just enough so that people know that we're struggling, but not all of it, to know like maybe what we can do to change it. Because when it comes down to like all those DEI talks, people are like, what are actual tangible action points so that we can help people in minority communities? People don't know what to say. And I think we need to start actually thinking of like, how can we support these communities tangibly versus just putting on events every month over the same topics. We can actually do something. But that starts within our community. How do we feel we need support? Because we can ask for it. But the thing is, I feel like we don't ask for it. we kind of just assume we're already either going to be turned down, looked down on, something. You're already assuming so much of people. But I don't know. I just think that it's kind of interesting to me that people don't think that they can live multiple lives at university.
Right.
You know? You can live different lives, have different friend groups. Try it.
Damn.
She
made all the right points.
I just thought
More
of
questions, Mike.
I just thought of a new talking point, but
all right.
I don't know if we should go into this one.
Go.
In the terms of just like, well, this is going to be completely off from everything we've talked about.
That's fine.
But I just wanted to talk a little bit about when I forget who the lady's name was, but remember when the nail salon thing happened where
with Oakland Nails?
The one where
I don't know if I was supposed to say that. Sorry.
No. The one where it was like a controversial, like national news, where, like the white dude like killed a whole bunch of like Chinese nail salon people.
Correct.
And I just, like you said, so when you were talking strictly on the DEI part of just about like helping community, it just kind of made me like realize that it's never like it's always in every single facet of like Asian culture. I feel like Asian cultures always feel like you'll never get help from anyone other than like yourself or, you know, your culture. Because I remember, you know, there was rallies, you know, people wanted to talk about, you know, just like what can other people do to help, you know, Asian, you know, the minority of Asians who are being misrepresented and who are struggling. And every single time I'd see like, you know, like a kid go up and they talk about like, you know, like growing up, and they would always just be like, you know, labeled like a kid who is just like a nerd or just like is just like pretty much essentially just worthless, and you're just like, oh, what the fuck, like goddamn. And then like the next person who comes up is just like some person who's like, we need gun reform, guys. Come on now, let's do gun reform. And I'm like, that doesn't like necessarily, like that could be a facet that could help in this situation, but that doesn't necessarily help the community of Asians in terms of like, you know, us growing and being more represented.
I think I might get shit for saying this too, but I think it's also kind of because in terms of the Asian community, we're very fragmented. Even that it's Filipinos or Filipinos stick with Filipinos, it's, you know, so on and so forth. I think we all need to recognize that we are all Asians in America and kind of band more together versus differentiating yourself to the point where it's like, it's your own community, it's their community, it's our community, it's a shared community of sense of self. And I think that we need to start standing up for ourselves more in terms of those things and just kind of looking out for one another. But also I kind of think it's like how we want to be perceived, because there is like model minority. Model minority where people don't think that we need help because we're doing so well monetarily. But for the respect aspect, there's a lot of things that are happening to our community.
I mean, like you said, like respect, like there's still like, I think Asians as a whole is probably geared towards like some of the weirdest things ever, from like fetishizing to just like beauty and everything like that. And just like, you know, I don't have the answer obviously, but like you said, I feel like we should definitely at least at the very most stand up for ourselves, because I feel like at least for like some of these more like global or like more news nationwide type things, I feel like, you know, I think Asians have the resilience to just be like, you know, I'm stronger than this. Whatever. You know, your kid gets bullied, I'm smarter than him. I don't care. He's dumb. Whatever. But like that perspective versus the person who is opposing you right now are two different things. The kid on the other side thinks, I won. My kid's weak or whatever. Sure, you might go like, whatever, I'm going to grow up and be accountant, doctor, whatever. I'll make millions or whatever. And, you know, for an individual standpoint, that's great. But like, you never really like teach anyone to kind of represent yourself and stand up, but more so just kind of lurk in the shadows and do your own thing. And in terms of representation, that will never help Asians as a whole, regardless of who you are, Chinese, Japanese, Filipino. You'll never be able to kind of have that thing where, you know, you can stay, like you have, I guess, a blueprint to be like, hey, I stood up for myself, and like this is not normal. Fetishization, everything like that.
I think with that, it's kind of like be more friends with people who aren't similar to you.
I mean,
because then you kind of normalize having those conversations, and you can kind of introduce yourself as a person versus just a stereotype.
Yeah.
And you kind of break down those stereotypes when you talk and meet new people.
Yeah. I think, especially for that, like, I think I've always, like, growing up, I've always, like, I never wanted to be, like, the Asian dude. You know, I've always wanted to be, like, no, like, why can't I be Michael who likes, you know, football and video games and everything like that? But, like, if the very first thing that you think of me is the Asian dude first, I think I've failed in terms of representation, because there's always, even when you look at, like, other cultures, black or white, like, I always feel like people will see them as, like, what they've done and not necessarily, like, you're like a white guy first or a black guy first, and then you're everything that you are. Yeah. And then for Asians, it's always like the Asian dude who smart, whatever, blah blah blah.
But I feel like it kind of works in the opposite for us. I feel like people are just like, oh, they're Asian, they must be smart, or it kind of negates us in terms of things like, oh, I'm sure they already got into Harvard, or they did something like great, because we have the minority aspect where people already expect us to be doing these things, that they're not surprised anymore. And I feel like it's almost working in the opposite for us, which is kind of difficult, like moving forward in terms of like all of that stuff. So it's like the opposite of affirmative action, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's literally the opposite. So
Bro, we fucked, bro.
Yeah.
Damn.
I do want to touch upon, because I think that the next, it's gonna be me being like theoretical or whatever, but like the next wave of things, I'm very fascinated into seeing what's going to be the next thing that people criticize and kind of segregate themselves on. I think that once we start becoming a more interracial race in general, I think we're going to start looking at things from a very different perspective. It's not just going to be about what you look like. Maybe it's now going to be about the shade of your skin, not the color of your skin, and monetarily speaking, because I mean, that's kind of like, I'm in a very small sense, that's kind of what happened with Brazil, because they've been interracial, like, I've had a lot more interracial marriages because of just how many people have come together in that country for a lot longer than the rest of the world. So it's kind of interesting to see that their take on beauty and their beauty standards and their type of culture is going to go. I think that's what we're heading towards.
Okay.
So.
It's going to be an interesting couple of years.
Yeah.
Or decades.
Yeah. And I think that kind of changes. I want to go back to like the Filipino thing, where it changes where we see ourselves as Filipino Americans. When is that going to stop? Like you said, the percentages, when are you going to stop considering yourself Filipino American, or like even Asian American? 99%, 98%, so on and so forth. Like where, what percentage matters in this case scenario?
Because like, I forget who this was, but I remember I had taken a 23andMe test.
I was about to say that. Yeah.
I was like, okay. So I looked at everything, and you know, and this is going to be from my perspective, and I'm going to switch it up a little bit. But so by numbers, I'm 97% Filipino.
Interesting.
And I said, damn. I said, damn. And I said, you know what? Maybe the 3 is like Mexican, Latino, something around there.
What is it?
Was not. You want to take a couple guesses? Let's take. Give me 3 guesses. Do you think there's 3 others? There's 3 others.
3 other,
like 1% for the last 90, or for the last 3%, because I was 97% Filipino, and then there was 1 for.
Is it like an Asian country, or what is it?
It's all Asian.
All Asian.
All Asian. I'll give you that.
All right, Vietnamese.
One.
Japanese.
No.
Chinese.
Yeah. This last one is like
Thai. Laos.
This one's like a place in the mountains, Himalayas.
Burma, Russia.
Close. It's like right next to India.
Nepal.
I was about to say Nepal, but no, is it not?
What is it?
That's Bhutan.
Oh,
that's interesting.
It's the flag with the like dragon.
Oh,
but
it's very
like
particular niche.
I know. I just like it literally showed, because like I remember I asked my mom. I was like, so like, what did my grandparents do? And she was like, well, your dad was like a fisherman, and your mom was just like at home. And I was like, all right, well, what, like, are these numbers fake? Like, it just gotta be. But like, and to like another point, like I said, like, I look at those 3%, don't even acknowledge it. Yeah. For the most part, if I went to CASA, if I went to VSA, or even if there was a BSA or something like that, even if I went to all those, I know 100%. If I said I'm 1% Chinese, you know, ain't nobody care. Ain't nobody care. And definitely for the most part of representation, they are not going to see me as Chinese.
Transitioning into this topic, I feel like the next topic I should talk about is like transnationalism. It's like when adopted people kind of take on the nationality or like kind of more traits of what their adopted family is.
Oh, that'd be dope.
I mean, we could do that for the next episode when Michelle comes on.
Yeah, because I was going to say it'd be very interesting to kind of see.
But yeah. And then, like, I guess to end off on my, like, talking point, like, you know, I had a friend, she's white. She, you know, she has, like, she has the thing where, like, she's European, but that's, like, 18 areas. And she's like, oh, I can just say it. I'm every single one. Yeah. From the highest of maybe, like, 25% to the lowest of, like 1. Yeah. And I feel like, at least in Western culture, that is validated. If you're 1% German, you're German to us. But, like, if you were to say that to just a Asian Eastern like thing, there's no, you're not. No, don't. You definitely not. And I don't know, like, or I guess I'm just blanking out, but I don't see why that's such a divide in terms of like.
I'm gonna take a stab at it. I feel like, look, geographically, I feel like Europe, if you compare it to like Asia, like all the countries in Europe are together. That, you know, like they're all in one big landmass, and I feel like to them, you know, cultures kind of blend in a sense. But for Asia, like the Philippines is located in the southeast, and, you know, Japan's up north. And so there's less, I feel like, there's more of a disconnect between cultures. We don't have more of culture blending. Like, you could take literally a train from Germany and get to Spain really quickly. You can't do that in Asia, like, at all. So I think that has something to do with it. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think it's because we're looking at it from an American perspective. Okay. I think if we looked at it from a European perspective, I think they might disagree in terms of that, especially if you're looking at their history of, like, who they've historically fought with. I think from our perspective, we're, like, all within, you know, your first generation. I'm consider myself second generation. We're all within that realm of we still are kind of close and tied with the motherland, versus a lot of other people, they're 5 generations out, 6 generations out. Right. So many years that, no offense to them, unless they're holding it really closely and their family still travels back to those places, they're very American. We have to also remember that American culture is this thing that in and of itself is a culture and that takes on a life of its own. So those percentages kind of matter, but I think it kind of matters only when they want it to, no offense. But like I said, unless you're, like, you know, traveling back to Italy every summer with your grandparents, even though you've been here for multiple generations, it's kind of hard for you to maintain that kind of cultural resemblance. Yeah.
Our guest is actually stuck outside because she forgot her ID, but she's outside. Gotcha. But you know, God, I wanted to delve into a lot more things. Yes. But, you know, it was a very fun time talking with you, Julianne.
Of course.
Any closing statements? Anything you want to talk about, just in terms of wrapping up? Anything you're doing?
My phone is blowing up. Sorry.
I would love to come back if you guys would have me.
Hell yeah.
I would just say, I think that in terms of everything we're talking about, just, like, challenge yourself. I think a lot of people get very comfortable with the way that they have things going. I just kind of urge people, if you want to see change, be the change, and just go out of your way to talk about the things that you want to talk about, learn about the things that you're curious about, and just be kind to one another. That's it. It was really amazing talking to you guys. I loved having this conversation.
Hey, man. Hey, look, now, even though we had everything for beauty standards, let me tell you what, I love when, you know, conversations can kind of just have a side tangent and we can just have a whole conversation. So I loved everything.
It's more organic that way.
Honestly,
yes.
I would want nothing more. But yeah.
Perfect.
But, you know, due to time constraints, that'll be it for episode 4 of the Chismis Corner podcast. I'm your host, Michael Pacifico.
I'm your other host, Like a Mamral.
And thank you, everybody, for watching, and goodbye.